This is Mark Devlin, author of Musical Truth Volumes 1 and 2, just weighing in with a few reflections on 9/11 as we approach the 17th anniversary of that event. And synchronistically, I'm recording this in Scotland on one of my road trips that I like to do from time to time. And I was doing the same thing when the news of that event broke back in 2001. I was on holiday with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and we were visiting this small town on the north coast of Scotland called Tongue, which is as remote and as tranquil and as far removed from all the madness that was going on in Manhattan and elsewhere in the US on that fateful day. So we're just enjoying some quiet time in this tranquil location, and I got a mobile phone call from my mum telling me that she'd just seen the news bulletin of all the madness that was going on over in the US. So we rushed back to the B&B house where we were staying and caught up with what was going on the TV. And I'm very sorry to say, to my great shame, that back in those days I swallowed the official line on what had happened, hook, line and sinker. And sadly, for a few years after that, I was still labouring under the mind-controlled delusion that it was all down to this dastardly, evil Muslim terrorist Osama bin Laden and his 19 mates with their box cutters. It wasn't until round about 2007, 2008 that I started to wake up out of this mind-controlled trance that I'd been in, and that was as a result of just starting to pay attention to alternative ways of looking at the world. And I pinpoint the time that I fully woke up, as I refer to it, as 2010, September 2010. And that was on a trip to New York. I was actually spending time in New York, and I had an opportunity to do a bit of reading and a bit of deep thinking, and I pinpoint that month as the one where everything suddenly started to make sense to me. So certainly for the last 8 years, probably getting on for 10, I have in no way accepted any aspect of the official version of what happened on 9/11. And that's entirely because prior to that point, I got all my information, or supposed information, on what was happening in the world from the mainstream media. State-controlled BBC and corporate-controlled news outlets. Of course, these organisations give you the official version of everything. They give you the version of events that you are entrained and conditioned to believe, and the vast majority of the general public believe just that. It's not until you start thinking for yourself and going to alternative sources and re-educating yourself, because what you're doing is undoing a lifetime of mind control, social engineering and entrainment, behavioural and thinking entrainment. And when you take back the power to decide where you get your information from and go seeking it from a wide variety of different sources, it presents a very different view on what's going on. And so it is with 9/11. We're at a point now in 2018 where, to be honest, there is no excuse for anyone to still be under the delusion of the official version of what happened. There are so many smoking guns, there are so many red flags, there are so many anomalies and discrepancies, so many holes in the official story, that you've got to be of a childlike immaturity to still cling on to that official version. I can understand why people do it, because deep down they might have a grudging knowledge that this event was to a very large extent an inside job and certainly wasn't pulled off by the forces we were told it did. But if you accept that, you've then got to accept that probably many other things in the world aren't the way you've been conditioned to believe they are either. And if the American government is capable of being complicit in an event as outrageous as 9/11, with all the chaos and the mayhem and the murder that it's involved when you factor in what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan as a direct result of that event, then you've got to ask yourself, what else are they capable of? And you have to come to the uncomfortable realization that the government is actually not your friend and is not protecting you and looking out for your best interest the way you always thought it did. And of course, that's absolutely the dynamic that we have at play in this world, and there's so much evidence now to support that I don't understand. It's just baffling and dumbfounding to me how anyone can still cling to the official version that bin Laden did it, the Bush administration had no idea it was coming, NORAD was taken by surprise, and all the rest of it that we're asked to believe, including the Building 7 debacle, of course, where the destruction of that building was announced some 20 odd minutes before it actually took place, with BBC reporter Jane Stanley right in front of it as she's told us it's gone down. It's funny, you don't see much of Jane Stanley on TV anymore, do you? Can't think why that is. Anyway, through the research that I do into the shenanigans and the nefarious behaviours that go on in the entertainment industry, I came across several years ago many instances of what's known as predictive programming, where aspects of what was going to happen on 9/11 had been encoded into movies, TV shows, cartoons like The Simpsons, pop music videos and record sleeves in not just the years leading up to the event, but decades, going all the way back. The earliest example I've been able to find, which I believe to be an aspect of predictive programming related to 9/11, dates from the late 1950s. And it's a pulp novel where you've got a clock face with two aeroplanes, and the planes are pointing to the 9 and the 11 on the clock, and there's a girl running away in terror. That to me seems to be an early indicator of what was known to be coming. So all the way through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and then there was a big ramping up of it towards the end of the 1990s as that 2001 date drew close. You had all these aspects indicating foreknowledge on the part of those that run the Hollywood film industry, the television industry and the music industry. You know, unless you're going to chalk up all these examples as mere coincidence at rates of several billion to one, the way some coincidence theorists seem to like to, then you have to come to the grudging acceptance that those who control the industries that allowed all this symbolism to appear are in some way connected to those parties that pulled off these events. So there's many famous examples. There's the Supertramp Breakfast in America sleeve, of course, dating back to 1979, which has been endlessly analysed. That basically tells you what was going to happen on September 11th, 2001. There was a record sleeve by a rap crew called The Coup that came out just 3 months prior to September 2001, gave some more very big clues. All kinds of movies. We can think about Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey, dating back to 1968, which predicted that something world-changing was going to happen in the year 2001, 33 years, interesting number, into the future when that movie came out in 68. It was the same year that the breaking of the ground started on construction of the World Trade Center towers, and I think a couple of years before that, or it might have been 1967, you had David Rockefeller, who was very instrumental in the construction of the World Trade Center towers, appearing on the cover of Time magazine in an article where the photograph focuses on his wristwatch, where the time just happens to be set to 9/11. We also have the instance of Prince in a concert in the Netherlands in 1998, coming out with the phrase, Osama bin Laden getting ready to bomb, 2001, hit me, which tends to hint at some foreknowledge on the part of Prince as to what was going to be coming. So it seems the general public was the last to know, because all these key players within the entertainment industry certainly had some indication that this event was going to be pulled off. So here we are then, 17 years afterwards. I don't know how many documentaries, YouTube videos, books, blog sites, radio shows, podcasts, talks, conferences have been done since that date, where people have torn apart the laughably infantile story of what really happened on that date. I love this synchronicity. I've just looked at the timer on the recording device that I'm doing this on, and just as I glanced up, the time on it was 9:11. I kid you not, you couldn't make this shit up. The universe is doing this. Anyway, as I was saying, there are so many indications now, blatantly obvious and verifiable factual indications that 9/11 was pulled off by parties other than the ones we were told it was, and that there was foreknowledge on the part not just of the US government and the security services, but key players in the entertainment industry as well. So the evidence is all there. There's no longer any justification for anyone to still be clinging to that desperate, ridiculous cover story. We need to face up to the fact that this event was pulled off by very dark forces that have infiltrated pretty much every aspect of life, of society. And this is far from the only event that they've been involved with. One of the good things, if there is a good thing to be taken from the events of 9/11, is that it has caused so many people to wake up out of their slumber, out of their trance, and start paying attention and asking critical questions about the true nature of the world in which we live and the problems that we face and what needs to be done to eradicate them. So many people I speak to say 9/11 was the catalyst to them going on to look at other areas of information and completely changing their worldview and changing their life and their behaviours and their thought patterns as a result. That is a process which needs to continue happening exponentially, and anything that can trigger that, in that sense, has to be a positive. So I just hope that people will continue to apply that critical thought, continue to throw out mainstream sources of so-called news and information, because all they are is mind control and thought entrainment, and stay on the path of truth, because it's the only path to be on, and once you set on it, there's no turning back. And why would you want to go back? Let's not waste the incredible opportunities that we have with these human lives to undergo valuable experiences and gain truth and wisdom and knowledge, apply that in the world in whatever way we can to make this place better and a more beneficial place for future generations to live, and then beyond that, to take that knowledge, wisdom and truth back to source with us when we depart this place, as we all surely will one day. I hope those words make sense. Those are my spontaneous reflections as this 17th anniversary of 9/11 approaches. Thanks.